Well, good afternoon. It's great to have you guys here. Thank you for, as Michael had said earlier, taking your Saturday to be with us. My name is Ann Devine, and I'm the program director for our Family Services program, which is the counseling program within Catholic Charities. So we are at several locations. So Michael is my direct boss. So you feel the pressure that I have to introduce my boss. But no, more than my boss, he is a very good friend of mine. I know this went off, I think. So can you hear me? You good? So he's a good friend of mine. Known Michael for the last probably 6 or 7 years. He is has a father of three little rowdy kids who are awesome to hang out with, who happen to just give great joy to my life. And he's also expecting another child as well. So it's with great joy just to be able to journey to get to know him on a personal level, but also to professionally know him, which has been fantastic. So as we heard today in Michael's talk, but also in the testimonies, this doesn't just include the individual, it impacts families. And I love what Dan had to say in his testimony, to have relentless love. Relentless love. And then we have to be caring, and then we have to be able to offer help, but in the end, we just have to love more. And so I think today Michael is going to be able to really give us the opportunity to learn more about how, as families, we can kind of be resilient in the midst of maybe facing that crisis within our own families. So please welcome Michael as he speaks today on building resiliency in families facing the opioid crisis.
Hi, thank you all. So I'm going to jump right in. The format for the breakout sessions, we're going to have about 30 minutes of me talking with about 10 minutes of Q&A. So I'm actually going to dive straight in because we have, as you would expect, quite a bit to cover. When we're talking about families and opioids, we may be talking about people in very different places. It could be a family who has a loved one who is already struggling with addiction. It could be a family who has lost someone to an addiction, or it could be a family who wants to make sure that they are trying to strengthen themselves in ways that will prevent future problems. But in all of these cases, we're talking about resiliency. Now, when considering resiliency, we're talking about two specific things. How does a family deal with outside stress? And how do the individual members of the family interact in a healthy way? Because when the individual members act and interact in a healthy way, then they are able to support each other in terms of facing the many challenges that life throws at them. And in order for our families to do this, we need two key things, which I will go into depth on. The first point, family members must be able to help each other without enabling. And families must be able to genuinely connect with each other. Now, as Anne said, I'm a father of three wonderful, she said rowdy, that's kind. I would have said moving at light speed. They have more energy than it is fair for anyone to have in their body, and certainly more than it's fair to ask me to chase at 3 o'clock in the morning. But they are delightful children. And as a father, I can say unequivocally there are few things in life as painful as watching a loved one suffer. When we see someone that we love suffering, we want to take that pain away. But we have to do it in a way that will legitimately help the person. We must help without enabling. We want to provide balanced help that genuinely helps the individual to grow. Because when things are out of balance, bad things happen. We get resentful, they get resentful, we both get resentful. We can give too much. We can enable. We can have boundary issues. This can lead to burnout. Or we can give too little. We can lack compassion, which can also be the result of boundary issues or lead to burnout or compassion fatigue. The difference between helping and enabling is this. Helping is doing something for someone else that they are not capable of doing for themselves. Enabling is doing something for someone else that they can and should be doing for themselves. Let me switch gears for a little bit. I want to talk about the principles of solidarity and subsidiarity. These are two of the four principles of Catholic social teaching, the other two being the dignity of the person and the common good. When we talk about solidarity, no human being can live for himself alone. He is always dependent on others. It involves a very deliberate, practical support for the well-being of all people. Vague words of compassion do not help. We are called to act. So we are called to help people who cannot help themselves. But contrast this with subsidiarity, in which every task of society should be assigned to the smallest possible group, sometimes an individual, that can perform that task. Only if the smaller group is unable to resolve the problem itself should a group at a higher level assume responsibility. So we have to encourage people to take responsibility for themselves where it is possible. St. Teresa of Calcutta, there's a great story about her. Someone was visiting one of her homes in India, and they saw one of her nuns pushing someone in a wheelchair down a hall. And this observer said, "How beautiful. How wonderful that your nun is assisting this person in traveling down the hall." And Mother Teresa said, "Yes, but this person will get stronger. And someday they will be able to propel themselves down the hall, at which point no one is going to push them." The thought being, we do for others when they cannot until they can, and then we ask them to do for themselves. We often think of the old axiom, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he can feed himself and his family forever. But in helping, are we helping move the person toward flourishing? Or are we unintentionally keeping them stuck? Let me give you this example. My son, Liam, is 9. What happens if I were to tie Liam's shoe every single day from the time that he first wears shoes with laces? 2, tying his shoes. That's okay. 4, tying his shoes. That's okay. 8? I don't know. 16? I hope not. Because if it gets to the point that my son says, "Dad, look, graduation's in about 20 minutes. I really need you to tie my shoes because I just don't want to trip when I get my diploma." Clearly, something is wrong here. So what are some of the consequences of me continuing to tie my son's shoes long after he should be doing it for himself? Well, he won't learn how to tie his shoe, obviously. But there are other consequences too. Will he start to believe he's not smart enough to tie his own shoe? Gosh, Dad's still tying my shoe. This must be really complicated. This must be too difficult for me to do on my own. And this, in turn, will have a negative impact on the way he sees himself. If I'm not smart enough to tie my shoe, what else am I not smart enough to do? There must be plenty of things I'm not able to do. Or even, my dad must think I'm stupid. My dad must think I'm not capable of tying my own shoe. We then have to look at ourselves. Why am I tying my 9-year-old's shoe? What is the motivation for me personally in doing this? Am I rushing somewhere and I don't have the extra 5 minutes it takes him to tie his shoe? Let me just do it. We got to go. We're late. Am I worried that he's going to trip? If you don't tie your shoes properly, they'll come undone, you'll step on it, you'll fall. I don't want to go to the ER today. I don't want you to break your arm. Or do I not want him to look like a mess? Golly, my kid is the one who's totally disheveled, hair's all over the place. My son actually has hair. He's filling my quota. I don't want to be the dad who lets his kid roll out looking like he just rolled out of bed. Are we okay with the fact that our children or any loved one are not perfect while they are learning how to master a skill? And ultimately, is it more about me than my child? Is it more about what people think about me, how I am perceived in the community, in my family, in my church, than it is about actually the individual? Because what we must consider are boundaries. The boundaries have sort of a dirty connotation in the Christian and Catholic world. Boundaries, a lot of people think, is just code for being a jerk. That is not at all the case. Boundaries are an important component of any healthy relationship. Boundaries tell us, where do you stop and where do I start? We might come really close on those 2 points, but there's a clear distinction between the two. It can look different in each unique relationship, but it is ultimately rooted in love for the person, for us and for them, in respecting those healthy boundaries. Now, you can have extremes, and extremes in these cases are clearly never good. You can have someone whose boundaries are too rigid. Castle walls. Drawbridge up, nobody's coming in. All of you need to stay out there. But this isolates us from people. This kills compassion. The flip side, walls. There are no walls. It's just an open meadow that people can come traipsing in. And there are two types here: sponges and bulldozers. Sponges take everything in. They cannot say no. They get taken advantage of. They get walked on. Bulldozers, and I'm sure you all know a couple in your life, look out, because here they come. They will just advance no matter what the situation is. It can lack respect for other people. These relationships can push too much and too far. In relationships, we have to be okay with the idea that no is an acceptable answer. We have to be willing to say no to our loved ones, and we are at a good place in the balance in our relationships when we can say yes without feeling resentful and no without feeling guilt. Oftentimes, and I think this is particularly true when dealing with substance abuse, we love the people in our lives so much we just want to keep saying yes and yes and yes, and we feel more and more resentful. And anytime we say no, it burns. That overwhelming feeling of guilt. It's my fault because I say no. It's my fault this is happening to you because I didn't give you that last $300 you asked me for. You can start to see significant problems here. We have to be consistent and we have to be clear. And one of the things that we must clearly and consistently keep in our own minds, you can love a person without approving or condoning their choices and their decisions and their actions. To say, no, I am not okay with this behavior, is not the same as saying, I reject you. It's not the same as saying, I stopped loving you because you did this. So my kids, again, if I come down in the morning and someone has got somebody else in a headlock, and there are teeth marks on somebody's arms, and the cat has been stuffed in the fridge, I can very clearly say, okay, I love all of you, but all of this isn't cool. You need to stop, let him out of the headlock, stop biting her, stop tormenting the cat. There's a clear sense of, I love you, but it doesn't mean I am approving of or condoning your choices. There's a phenomenon called Caretakers Disorder. It's the concern or the fear that we aren't giving enough to the people in need in our lives. It's the belief that we are solely responsible for fixing the situation for our loved one. But we have to reasonably assess, have we done what we are able to do in a healthy way? Case in point, the human body has 8 pints of blood in it. A healthy adult can give a pint every couple of weeks for the rest of their life, or at least for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Or I can give you all 8 right now. And then I'm dead. We have to consider what we are doing. We have to pace ourselves and say, my ability to help and transform your life and the lives of others should be measured in a much longer term, rather than say, immediately I'm giving you everything I have until there is nothing left of me but a dried up, resentful husk. In the one long-term study that examined the best rates of reducing future likelihood of abusing prescription opioids, the interventions were aimed at junior high students and their families. So we talk about the idea of intervening at that early intergenerational level. And it's true that a strong and connected family can reduce the risk of children inappropriately using pain medications, which, as we saw earlier this morning, opens up a gateway to a whole bunch of other potential options and paths which are not good. So what are the 4 elements of an engaged family? 1, unconditional love. 2, consistency and clear expectations. 3, an ability to take responsibility. And 4, the family enjoys spending time together. Now, when I talk about families, in many ways we are thinking about children, young children and adults. But the truth is, this holds for families of all ages. This is as true for families where the children are grown as it does for children who are younger than junior high. So, in order, let's go into those 4 points in a little more depth. Unconditional love. We love the person because of who they are. It's not tied to accomplishment or achievement. Conditional love is the idea of I love you if, or I love you when. So in grad school, I was paying the bills working as a tutor for an SAT prep company. And on this particular Saturday, I was here with this young woman who was there every Saturday. Her parents were sending her to prepare for the SATs. And we had been working on some homework that she had, actually some physics homework, I think. And I said, okay, well, we got that taken care of. Do you want to go ahead and do a practice math exam? And she said yes, and burst into tears. Now, I wasn't a psychologist at that point, but my highly attuned clinical skills told me that she might be sad. So I said, okay, what's going on? And she put her head up and she said, I've already taken the SATs. I got a 1590 on the SATs. This was before the switch to the 2400, when 1600 was the maximum that you could get. This young woman was in the 99th percentile in terms of her scores. She was a sophomore in high school. Her parents were requiring her to come on Saturdays for 3 hours at a time for that extra 1%. And she said something that was really profound. How perfect do I need to be before they'll love me? What's it going to take for them to accept me for who I am? And I think about that young woman often, and I hope that her parents at some point were able to see what a remarkable daughter they had. But that's a great example of conditional love. You're almost good enough, but not quite. Those 10 extra points, that's what we need. And the incredible pressure that put on her. So that's unconditional love. Consistency, clear expectations. Expectations are the rules we have for our families and for our relationships. Think of how odd it would be if you played a game and somebody just kept changing the rules at random. I've done this. It's called playing chess with a 3-year-old. Oh, the queen moves that way. Mm-hmm. Oh, the horse is now having a tea party. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. You know, it's not the sort of game that you can win, and certainly not one you would continue playing if somebody won't tell you how you ought to engage. Consistency in relationships is extremely important, not just for children, but for adults as well. It helps us feel safe. It helps us feel secure. So we have to stick to what we say and mean it. Because if you set a limit and somebody whines or gripes or complains and you fold, they'll never respect that limit. No, you can't have $200. Oh, I can't, but I need, okay, fine. What happens next time? They'll just keep pushing harder. In relationships, and this is a parenting example, but it is true with everything, there are 4 types of parenting. And you can measure these on a basis of love and expectation. So imagine, if you will, a grid. Yeah, love, low love, expectation, high expectation, low expectation. And if you chart those 4 quadrants out, you end up with 4 combinations, 3 of which are bad. So if you have a permissive relationship, you have love but no expectation. Do what you want, that's fine. You want to eat cotton candy for breakfast? No problem. I'm sure the dentist will be fine with it. Do what you want. Authoritarian, on the other hand, all expectation, no love. Don't screw up. You will hear from me when I am angry at you, and that is it. If you do what you need to, I'll leave you alone. If there's neither love nor expectation, it's neglecting or rejecting. You can do what you want because I don't give a damn. You don't matter to me. I don't care. And I have other things that I can be spending my time on that are far more important. So the appropriate balance is when we have high love and high expectation. And this is not authoritarian, but authoritative. This is saying, I do want the best for you because I know you can achieve it, and I will be right there with you the whole way. And if it doesn't go well, it's okay. We'll dust you off, we'll pick you up, we'll go back at it together. Because I know you can achieve so much more, and I desire that for you. So what are we calling each other to? Are we truly calling each other to flourish? So that's consistency and clear expectations. An ability to take responsibility. We have to be able to take responsibility for the time in which we are wrong. We make mistakes. We're human, we do. It doesn't undermine our authority to admit that we are wrong, especially with parents. I've had a lot of parents say, I can't admit I'm wrong in front of my kids. They'll lose respect for me. Let me tell you what, our kids are not idiots. They know when we're wrong. They know it often before we do. So acknowledging that is not a problem. It's pretending that you're not wrong. That's what undermines authority. And when we recognize we have done something that requires forgiveness, seek forgiveness. Apologize. Apologizing sets a great example in relationships. It shows how to repair relationships that have been ruptured. It gives a model of how to resolve conflict in a positive way that not just our children, but anyone could take and say, oh, this is how we make things better. This is how we fix things. When you are willing to apologize to someone, it conveys clearly, I see you as having dignity, I see you as being worthy of my respect, and you are worth the time it takes me to apologize. I care enough about our relationship to fix this. And genuinely apologize. Ask for forgiveness. When someone wrongs you and you forgive them, genuinely forgive them. Because it doesn't help to hold on to things and use it the next time a kid messes up. If my son hits my daughter, and he says sorry to her and to me, and I forgive him, the next time he has a tantrum, I can't say, oh, it was just like those 18 other times when you hit here and here and here. No, then you're just storing up ammo for the next time you're trying to wound someone. We want to legitimately forgive. There are genuine health benefits of forgiving as well. People who forgive are less likely to feel angry or sad or out of control than those who don't forgive. Forgiveness is associated with increased physical health, quality of sleep, and reduced fatigue. And in a 2011 study of married couples, the research showed that when the victim in a situation forgave the offending party, both had a decrease in blood pressure. both had a reduction in stress. The final point, enjoying spending time together. This is really easy when there are shared interests. However, if you look at the people in your life, the people in your family, it is unlikely that all of you overlap perfectly on everything. But if you don't, as parents, we can set the example. We can lead by example in taking interest in the things that are of interest to our children. Case in point, my wife, my kids love the beach. Every year for a week, we go camping on the beach down at the Outer Banks. We're in a tent about 200 yards from the water. This is something they look forward to all year long. I grew up in inner city London. I hate the beach. I hate sand. The idea of being in a tent with no air conditioning, where you have wet sand and mosquitoes and cactus, because there are cactus at the beach, that sounds miserable. I do not like it. I would not choose it. And it's one of my favorite weeks of the year. Why? Because I haven't learned to love the beach. I've learned to love being at the beach with my family. I've learned to love seeing them at the beach. Because it's not really about the activity. The activity is secondary to our desire to genuinely be with the other person. Our ultimate aim is a genuine encounter, one in which we are completely present to the person, where the interaction isn't being mediated, like Facebook is a mediated encounter. It's not face-to-face. It's not a distracted encounter, like watching TV or messing with your phone while trying to talk to somebody. We want to be engaged and connected so that we can understand the challenges faced by each member of the family. Because if we cannot talk about the things that do not matter, if we cannot talk about the little things, how can we expect to talk about the big things? If I don't show an interest in whatever Pokemon, my kid might be interested in the time, how can he possibly expect me to take an interest when he comes to me and says, Dad, I think the kids in my class are smoking weed. We have to make sure that the relationship is open so that each member of the family is comfortable in being candid with their concerns. So if a teenager's peers are experimenting with drugs, we want our children to be safe and comfortable in their belief that they can bring that to us and we will hear them. And in that response, we want to be able to support them in resisting whatever temptation or whatever pitfall is there. So in conclusion, within our families, within our relationships, we want to consider 4 things. What does this person truly need from me right now? Not what do they want, but what do they really need? 2, how will my action move them toward flourishing? Think long-term goals here. There's a term that gets thrown around by priests in confessions called gradualism. If somebody comes in and they are habitually struggling with a problem, the priest doesn't say, okay, well, by next week you need to stop drinking. You accompany the person little by little as they move towards flourishing and the good. We want the same thing. We want to meet people where they are, but not leave them there. We want to meet our family members where they are in their challenge and be willing to accompany them, not carry them, not if they can walk on their own, but accompany them towards something better. The third point, how can I convey both my love for the person and my confidence for them in this encounter? Are we willing to respect their dignity even when they are not? And finally, how can we better engage as a family so that we can support each other against the traps and the snares and the pitfalls and the darkness that we face every single day? I'd like to close by saying, as the theme of the conference has said, and as so many people very eloquently said during the discussion period after the keynote, there is hope. This is not all there is. And the hope is not easy. And change is not magical. But there is hope that the lives of the people we love around us can improve, can flourish. Thank you all. God bless. All right, we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. We don't have a microphone, so stand up, be loud. So, yes, sir.
Thank you for your insights. Both earlier and certainly just now. I happen to be a member of this parish, but a friend from another parish had to leave. And I promised him I would ask you this, because I know it's a great question. And I realize it's probably hard to come on that kind of information. But in terms of like the census, if that's the right word, or depiction of the number of cases and unfortunately deaths, is there some sort of a track or a record of how many that might have been members of, not necessarily Catholic faith, but any faith at all, or had they, unfortunately, were they a surprise or not? I guess.
Sure. It's a great question. So the question is, of the people who died in overdoses, of the people who struggle with substance abuse, is faith a preventative? Is faith a protective factor? And honestly, I have not come across any data to suggest one thing or another. I will certainly look into that. I am of two minds on this. I would say for the people who broadly identify themselves as religious, no, there is no factor. There is no determinant because it is such a broad impact. Of the people for whom their faith is central and core to their lives, I would think yes, that can be a preventative factor. So a lot of it too talks about the idea of to what extent have we really internalized and drawn our understanding of the faith into something central in our lives. But I will certainly go and continue to research that. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Interesting corollary. It doesn't answer your question, but if you think about NA and AA, they're both spiritually based in the 12-step program. And I know that that is sometimes an impediment for people who feel themselves to be agnostic or atheists to those types of programs. So there's been attempts to try and deal with that. And I know, but it doesn't answer the question, but it's the way that a lot of
Sure.
people do it.
And we do have, so one thing that has been happening more, so the Catholic Medical Association is starting to become more involved in addressing the opioid crisis. In fact, they were called in by the government to go and say, how do we incorporate faith elements into a response? Because a lot of the responses, the attempts to resolve the issues don't seem to be working. So can we go and incorporate more spirituality, more faith-based practices into an intervention? It'll be really interesting to see where the Catholic Medical Association goes with this. My colleague at Catholic Charities, Dr. Frank Moncher, is actually going to be the diocesan representative with a task force that the Catholic Medical Association is creating to try some specific almost pilot programs in different dioceses. We are hoping that Arlington will be one of those pilot programs. Yes, ma'am.
I'm married to my husband and I run an addiction clinic.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a really key point for recovery. Most of those that come into our place do not have faith base. And so we try to encourage them to really connect there because you can't do this alone. This is supernatural. We're talking about powers here. Different spirits. This is a spiritual warfare. And the other one wants to go after our children and kill our families. And we've got to realize it's a spiritual battle. So any place, I think what you said about the meetings, that's a great place for people, to encourage people to go who are really against it. And it's kind of hard because they've lived a life where it's everything against the faith. So so it's hard for them to even reconcile. But many of them have not had that formation, and if they do, it's really incredible to see them come back. You know, we've seen some come back, and moms and grandparents, oh my gosh, just keep praying. You know, it's not the only answer, but your prayers are really powerful. And we've seen the parents who really just keep steadfastly doing everything they can, but put that prayer element in, many times their kids come back.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would like to have you address the stigma issue
Sure.
on mental health and also substance use disease.
No, I absolutely agree. In terms of stigmas, this is one of the key factors, I think, that my hope is that we, moving forward as a community, can start to address part of the stigmas. Now, the stigma of mental health issues, that's something that professionally I've been dealing with for a decade and a half at this point. People saying, well, okay, are people going to think I'm lazy? No, you're depressed. It's interesting, as soon as something becomes emotional, we believe that it becomes a moral issue. I'll give you this example. Although you wouldn't know it to look at me, I am one of the most anemic people you will ever meet in your life. I have actually had doctors tell me, do not give blood, because if you donated a bag full of water with red food coloring in it, that would be of greater use to the blood bank than the stuff you've got coursing through your body. I've been taking heavy iron supplements my entire adult life, and certainly from my teenage years. And when I don't take my iron supplements, I will sleep for about 14 hours a day and still not feel particularly rested. Now, fortunately, I'm married to a woman who is much, much smarter than I am. So in grad school, when I would be just so busy studying that I would forget that I was out of iron and wouldn't take it for a couple days, she'd go, "You idiot, fine, I'll go to CVS and get you some iron." That, I can tell that story and people go, "Oh yeah, we get that. You're not lazy, it's an iron issue." Or somebody who's diabetic, there's nothing moral about the fact that your body doesn't deal well with insulin. But suddenly, if it's a serotonin imbalance, a dopamine imbalance, well, you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What do you have to be sad about? Why are you depressed? Anxious? You just need to trust God more. Well, the truth is, for some people, there is a biochemical imbalance. This is not a moral statement. This is just the constitution of who they are physically. In the same way that I have blue eyes and no hair. That's who I am on a physical level. So when you talk about the stigma, we have to understand several things. One, some people are more prone to mental illness. Some people genetically are more predispositioned to addiction. And like the examples I was giving earlier, there is not an intention to say, you know what, it's a beautiful day, I'm going to go get myself addicted to heroin. What is going on in this person's life in which they need support and either weren't getting it before they got to a point that there was a catastrophe, or didn't understand the risks involved? So I think what we can do from a faith-based response is start treating people with mercy. Look beyond the disease, be it the addiction, the depression, the bipolar, the schizophrenia, and try to actually see the person and connect with them there. I think if we start to do that and lead by example, my hope is that others will follow. We've got time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Okay, so in April 2004, I was riding my bicycle on Twinbrook Road, just south of Braddock Road in Fairfax County. And I was hit by a car and knocked to the ground. It could have been, that was it for my bicycle. My bike was ruined. It could have been it for me. I was taken to Fairfax Hospital in Fairfax, and I luckily only had a broken ankle. And I was, my sister picked me up, took me home, and I was given a prescription for 20 Percocets. And I went and got the prescription that evening, and my room got it. And I took one of them, and I said, "Oh God, this is good." And I'd heard a little bit about these before. I said, "I better not take it," and I didn't. feel that had I taken any more of these Percocets, that I probably could have been one of the people that, we're talking about today, but I didn't. And then earlier this year, I was on my bike again, and I fell and broke my kneecap. And I got another prescription pill. I didn't have the same buzz. It killed the pain, but didn't have the same buzz. So I think that these drugs that people are using today, I think that the pharmaceutical industry has wisened up a little bit. But I'm so glad that I didn't take more than one of those Percocets in 2004. We've heard a lot about people who are in recovery. And I guess about 10 years ago, I read this book by William Cope Moyer, the son of Bill Moyer, PBS guy.
Yep.
And there was one sentence that stood out, and it was, relapse is a part of recovery. And so I guess my question is, you're talking about resilience. What are you doing not only to help someone get sober, but then after those people relapse? And, it's
Sure.
7 or 8 times.
Right. And I'll keep us quick on this because we're right at time. This, I think, is when we talk about that idea of high love and high expectation. It's not, you relapsed. We worked so hard, forget it. I am done with you. It's saying, no, okay, you fell. Let's dust you off, pick you up, and we will continue to accompany, because I've heard many people say that there is no one point of recovery. Recovery continues. Recovery is something that you always want to be working on. It's never a point that you say, well, I'm not going to have to fight this today. It's saying, okay, can we be aware of this, and what can we do differently? What can we learn? Every time we stumble, if we fall down 7 times, can we get up every time? Are we willing to go and say, okay, with the support of the people around me who are with me, but not doing it for me, how do we move forward? All right, I'm going to end us there. I am going to be around the rest of the day if anyone has any more questions. There will be 2 more. There are going to be 2 more options for you for the next breakout. We have got Father Hushin will be next door, and then all the way down at the end of the hall is going to be Dr. Nemec. They will be talking about healing and suffering in Christ, and also community responses, respectively. Thank you all very much.